Have you ever really stopped to think about that pill you take? About the incredible, mostly invisible system that makes sure it's safe? Well, today, we're pulling back the curtain on that hidden world of pharmaceutical quality control.
I mean, think about it. That's a huge question, right? We're not talking about making just one perfect pill. We're talking about making the millionth pill, the billionth pill, exactly as perfect as the very first one. So how in the world do they actually do that?
Okay, here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll lay out the big problem. Then, we'll get into the solution, this idea of proving that things work. We'll take a deep dive into something we all understand, cleaning, to see it in action. Then, we'll zoom out and see how this applies to everything from water to software. And finally, we'll look at the master plan that holds it all together.
So let's start with the challenge itself. This is not your typical factory. We're in a world where a mistake can be measured in micrograms, where every single step has potentially life or death consequences. And this quote, right from the World Health Organization, is really the whole philosophy in a nutshell. It's a complete shift in thinking. It means you can't just check the pills at the end of the line and hope you catch the bad ones. Quality has to be built in from the very beginning. It's all about preventing problems, not just finding them. So if you can't just test at the end, what's the answer? How do you build that quality in? Well, it all comes down to one really powerful idea: validation. Okay, let's look at the official definition, because the keywords here are everything: proving, documenting, and consistently. This is the exact opposite of just hoping for the best. Validation is the hard, scientific proof, written down and verified, that your process does exactly what you claim it does, every single time. Now, validation doesn't ride solo. It has a partner, and that partner is called qualification. Think of it this way. If validation is about having the perfect recipe for a cake, qualification is about making sure your oven is working perfectly. It's all about the tools you're using. So here's how they fit together, and this is so important. Qualification comes first. It asks, is my oven installed right? Does it get to 350 degrees and stay there? It's all about the machine itself. Then comes validation. It asks, okay, now that we know the oven is perfect, does my process, my recipe using this specific oven, produce a perfect cake every single time? You see, you have to have both. You can't validate a process using broken equipment. All right, so enough with the theory. Let's make this real. We're going to dive into something we all think we know about, but trust me, not on this level. We're going to talk about cleaning. Now, in a pharmaceutical plant that might make a powerful heart medication one day and an antibiotic the next, Tidy doesn't even begin to cover it. We're talking about preventing cross-contamination. Imagine just a tiny, microscopic trace of that heart drug getting into the next batch of medicine. It could be catastrophic. And that is why we have cleaning validation. It's the documented proof that this can't happen. And this is a full-on scientific procedure. You can see the steps. First, they write a super detailed plan. Then they do the cleaning exactly that way. Then comes the proof. They take actual swabs from the equipment or test the rinse water, and they send those samples to a lab to be analyzed. Finally, it all goes into an official report. It's a complete, documented loop. Okay, but that brings up the big question, right? How clean is clean enough? You can't just have someone look at it and say, yeah, looks good. The standard has to be scientific, objective, and based entirely on patient safety. And to answer that, there are some incredibly strict rules. Of course, it starts with the obvious. It has to be visually clean to the naked eye, but that's just the beginning. Then they get into the really heavy science, using things like dose-based calculations to make sure any tiny leftover amount is way, way below a level that could have any effect. And the rule is you always have to meet the toughest, most strict criteria of the bunch. So let me give you a number. A really common limit for how much residue can be left behind is 10 parts per million, 10 ppm. Now, what does that actually mean? It's like this. Imagine a city the size of San Jose or Austin, 1 million people, and your job is to find 10 specific individuals in that entire city. That is the level of clean we're talking about. It's a level of purity that is just mind-boggling, and it has to be proven with sensitive lab equipment. Okay, so we've seen how incredibly deep this goes for just one thing, cleaning. But now let's zoom out, because that same obsessive need for proof, that same rigor is applied to literally every part of a pharmaceutical factory. I mean,
everything. The air systems, the HVAC, are validated to make sure there are no contaminants. The water, especially water used for injectable drugs, is validated to be unbelievably pure. Even the computer software that runs all the machines, yep, that's validated too. Nothing, and I mean nothing, gets a free pass.
So you've got all this validation happening all over the place. How on earth does a company keep track of it all? How do they make sure nothing gets missed? Well, there's a single document that acts as the roadmap for everything.
It's called the Validation Master Plan, or VMP for short. You can pretty much think of it as the company's constitution for quality. It's the top-level document that lays out their entire strategy and philosophy for how they're going to prove their processes work. And this plan covers it all. It defines who is responsible for what, it lists every single system that needs to be validated, and crucially, it lays out how they handle change. So if a mechanic swaps out one tiny part on a machine, the VMP dictates exactly what needs to be revalidated to prove the process is still perfect. It's the ultimate safety net. So when you put it all together, you realize validation isn't just about paperwork. It's this active, relentless process of scientific proof. It's the invisible system that makes sure the medicine we rely on is safe and effective, batch after batch after batch.
So the next time you take a medicine, maybe just for a second, think about that. Think about all the invisible systems, the obsessive attention to detail, and all the proof that went into making sure what you're holding is safe. Because you're not just trusting the pill itself, you're trusting the process, a process built on one profound life-saving principle: prove it works.